Entrepreneurship versus employment. Which path leads to success?
I am excited about this show because we have seen both of these play out. I mean, I think all of us have seen these play out. We've heard the story of the incredible entrepreneur that starts at the very bottom and builds a business from scratch, and it turns out to be incredible, and they get to live life on their terms and the way they want to. And we've also heard the story of the person who starts in the mailroom at the major corporation. They work all their way up to the boardroom and they save over an entire career and they buy the house and they build the white picket fence and they have
watch.
2.6 kids and they get the pension and the gold watch and it worked out perfectly. And both of those stories sound amazing, but is that a given? Is that what both of those routes always turn into, or is there perhaps more to the story?
I think we're the perfect people to share this because I know there's this whole culture of pushing people to be entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. We've had the front row seat to see what creates success, work with successful people, even do some entrepreneurial type stuff ourselves. So we plan on being the tour guide that kind of lays it out there in a very balanced approach because we're actually pro both and we just want people to know how does this work for your specific situation so you can really risk analysis in the appropriate way.
And Brian, we were talking about, we're like, okay, well there's obviously some ideas around what these paths look like, specifically as it relates to achieving financial independence. And so you and I were talking, and we said, man, is there a way that maybe we could depict this visually? Is there an illustration that we could show that would kind of show the difference in like traditional employment in the pursuit of financial independence versus entrepreneurship in the pursuit of financial independence? And I think what we came up with was pretty decent.
Yeah. You know, we often talk about that building wealth is incredibly simple. As long as you have the three ingredients of wealth, which is you have the discipline to lean into living on less than you make, that creates the margin or money. That's the second component, that if you give it enough time, it creates wealth. And I think that's what employment kind of leans into.
It's the yo-yo walk up the mountain we talk about all the time.
You can get there, and it's simple, not necessarily easy based upon the stats of how many people do it, but at least there is a well-worn path to things that work as an employee as long as you do those three things with wealth creation. Entrepreneurship, a little bit more of the wild, wild west is because yes, as you can see, you're climbing the mountain straight up and there can be riches if you can manage the peril. But what we talked about in show prep, if you're going the employment route, and don't misread me, we're going to give you the pros and cons of both of these. So I'm not handicapping this where it seems like entrepreneurship is crazy, but I want to give you the context. When you're an employee and you have a stumbling block or a fall, you get a strawberry on your knee like you're walking up this mountain. When you fall off the cliff of entrepreneurship, if you're not careful, if you didn't do the right preparation, the right planning, if you didn't tie yourself off at the right place and get a secure hold on it, it could actually ruin you.
That's right.
And that's why I thought this visual, y'all probably saw it on social media, this originally started as Bo doing a doodle on a paper towel at lunch, but it's turned into a little labor of love by Daniel.
And what I think is interesting is, Brian, we know enough people. I think if you gave them the option, say, hey, if you are pursuing wealth, if you're pursuing financial independence, which route would you go? And some people, based on their own risk tolerance, risk capacity, and appetite for risk in general, they'd say, oh, I want the slow, steady, safe route. And there are others say, hey, no way, give me the cliff. I want to get there as quickly as possible. And neither of them are 100% right or 100% wrong. But they are custom to you. And so you need to understand, okay, what truly are the benefits of each of these paths and what truly are the risks or the costs associated with these paths, and how do I decide which one is best for me? And then we're going to take it even a step further. What would the money guys recommend I do? How would they counsel me to figure out which path I should go?
So let's jump right into this because you can see we're going to break this into two segments. We're going to do the pros and cons of each. Let's start off with employment because that's the path that's probably going to capture the majority of the people out there.
Yeah, and so the number one, I would say most significant benefit when it comes to being an employee is that generally speaking, you have more security than an entrepreneur. You have a boss or you work for a well-established business that has already proved viability. And at the end of the day, the buck doesn't necessarily stop at you. It stops at someone else in your organization. So with that, there's a safety net. There's some security that's there that may not necessarily be the same when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Another benefit that comes from being an employee, and I think this actually even benefits aspiring entrepreneurs who at least have to start off as an employee first, is that you get the valuable resource of experience and actually building mastery in a skill set. That is one thing that troubles me about sometimes when I see content on the social media where people right out of the gate, whether they're graduating college or whatever, they don't actually lean into this part of getting a mentor, working for somebody, and developing mastery of something, a skill that's very valuable.
I'm amazed all the time, Brian. We go to conferences and we'll see tons of people that are financial coaches, and I'll be like, "Oh, great, that's awesome! You're a financial coach. Tell me your background." I'm like, "Oh, I just like I like finance." And well, what have you done? Like,
you're gonna get some hate
how
on
have
that.
you coached? So like, what are the things that you have participated in?
That's a spicy take. You're gonna get some
I'm just
heat.
saying. I think now, if you've gone through courses and you've gone through curriculum and you've had some sort of training, that makes a lot of sense. Or if you have built up some level of financial success yourself, that makes sense. If you just came right out of college and your very first stop is to financially coach people, I would argue perhaps you haven't developed the skill set or the experience necessary to put you in that position. You disagree with that? You want to?
No.
Is that a bad take?
I just
is
think
that a hot
you know
take?
me. It's not a hot take. It's actually a very accurate take, but it's got a little sizzle in it.
All right, I'll take that.
A little sizzle, a little spicy.
Let me tell you another benefit when it comes to traditional employment. Most likely, with most jobs, your income is stable, which is great for planning if you have big life goal changes. When you're an entrepreneur, it's not uncommon that what you eat is what you kill. And so some months you're flush and some months you're bust. When it comes to employment, unless you're in like a commission-based or high sales type position, you likely have a more stable cash flow, which makes it easy to tackle, especially some of the big life transitions that happen early in life.
Oh, yeah. Anybody who's ever tried to buy a house, I mean, when you tell them you have a W-2, the lender's like, "Ooh, they like it. How long you been working at that job?" "Oh man, this is gonna be great." However, you tell them you're self-employed, even if you're self-employed with a decent income, they're like, "Ooh, I might need to see a few extra years to make sure you really make that on a consistent level." They kind of treat you as a completely different person, and that's something that to be mindful. It is definitely easier on some of those big life transitions if you have the stability and the paycheck that's coming in.
Another big benefit of employment that a lot of people don't think about, but we've seen this in practice, is that it allows you to focus on being paid for the things that you are actually good at. What you'll find is when you come into entrepreneurship, you're going to have to wear a whole lot of hats. And while your thing may be selling doodads, as a doodad seller, you've also got to be really good at HR, and you got to be really good at payroll, and you got to be really good at bookkeeping. You have to wear 1,000 different hats. When you are an employee, it allows you to laser focus on a specific job responsibility that you can excel at.
I often think, we've done all the different personality types that create wealth. And there's a type, the virtuoso, somebody who does something very distinct, very talented. Those people, I think, in the right setup, they're so good and so specialized. They are great at potentially being employees, but a lot of times when I work with these people and they're on the entrepreneur side, they are hot messes.
Yep.
And maybe I shouldn't say that out loud.
But it's true.
But it is. I mean, you look at their books or you start talking about retirement funding and setting up, and plans that require annual compliance. And I don't want to do that. I'm good at this. Let me do what I'm good at because that's what I'm like, what you're describing, you either need to find a great CFO.
Yep.
Or you need to go work for somebody that unleashes you and takes all this other specialized. Because I can tell you as an entrepreneur, I do a lot of, and you do as well. We are the flex people. I mean, it's not my job when you own the company.
That's right. That's exactly right. Another big benefit of being an employee for a traditional employer is that being part of something established has some automatic recognition with it. I mean, think about the people you meet when they work for a large corporation like an Apple or a Google or a Tesla or a fill in the blank. Whereas in your experience, Brian, being an entrepreneur, maybe it wasn't quite the same level of recognition.
Well, I know. I worked for a prestigious firm before I started my first company. And I remember a cohort that we were really close, same level when I left the firm. It was like 2 or 3 years later after I'd left to go start my first company, he got recognized by, the who's who of wealth managers and financial planners. I couldn't even have sniffed on that list because I was 3 years into my brand new endeavor, and he looked like he was going places in this very established brand. And then to get what you're talking about, it happened more than once that I would tell people I had just started my own company, and they're like, "Oh, I've got a friend that's unemployed too." And they thought, and I get it, because there are some people, I even have some success stories where people were laid off and they started an endeavor because of their inability to go replace the job that they had been fired from. But it was a little disheartening to hear people say, "Hey, I feel for you. I'm sorry you're unemployed while you're doing this," when I would tell them, no, I actually voluntarily chose to go this path.
No, seriously, I'm not unemployed. I love it. And then here's the last benefit that a lot of people don't realize until they get on the other side of this, is that as a traditional employee, you're going to pay less in payroll taxes, right? So we all have to pay a portion of Social Security and a portion of Medicare when we earn income. Well, when you are an employee, you pay for half of it and your employer pays for the other half of it. When you are self-employed, when you are the employer yourself, you get the benefit of paying both sides of it. So there is a chance as an employee, you likely will pay less in taxes, and you'll also have less compliance headaches to make sure all the right forms are filed and all the right taxes are accounted for each year when you do your annual compliance.
Exactly, because the less compliance is a real thing. You get that W-2, the withholdings were done for you. It's all taken care of. Your health insurance is likely all deducted and set up. When you go the other way with it, self-employed, a lot more headaches there that come with the paying taxes and just keeping the Uncle Sam, our favorite taxing uncle, happy.
All right, Brent, so we've talked about the benefits of employment. Let's talk about some of the downsides now. Now, this first one I think is really interesting, and I know this one is specific as you think about your story, but as an employee, it's likely your schedule's not as flexible as you would like for it to be. And so what you have to do is you have to determine what are the things and areas that I will prioritize and what are the opportunity costs of those. If I want to focus on X, I've got to give up Y to be able to do that. As an employee, you're often faced with those decisions.
Yeah, I remember, and I shared this. This is one of those points of clarity that I got, is that when my father was sick, and my employer was great in the fact they let me go and visit my father in the hospital. But then when it got to the point that he actually passed away, I only got to take a day off of work because we just had a lot of stuff going on. And that was one of those things where I look back with some regret on, those life decisions. And that actually, it made me think about and ponder after my father passed away. I had a great father in the fact that he came to the plays I was in or the tennis matches I played in, and I was on a path where I was not going to get to do any of that stuff because I didn't really control my schedule.
Sure.
So that's something, I get it when you are, hopefully if you can work for an employer that gives you the flexibility to live your best version with them. It doesn't have to be a downside, but for a lot of people, it is one of those things where, and that's actually something when you're trying to figure out, are you an independent contractor or are you an employee? One of the first questions the IRS will ask you is, hey, does your employer have the ability to tell you when and where you have to be? And if the answer is yes, then you're an employee. You're not an independent contractor. So owning your time is just a little different when you're an employee.
Another downside of being a traditional employee is that in reality, your salary and earnings may be more limited, right? There may be a cap in terms of what you can earn, or there may be a pace at which you will be able to increase your income, but no faster than that. With entrepreneurship, that may or may not be the case, but as an employee, you likely don't get to control those decisions. So I'd argue that's a downside of traditional employment.
We also put in, and I have an experience here on this, is you have less control over what you do and how you do it. There's a reason there's movies that were cult classics like Office Space or Horrible Bosses, and other things like that, is because sometimes you get in an employment situation where you have horrible people that are above you and you're kind of at their will, and that can be tough when you don't have that control.
Yep. So okay, we've talked about the pros and the cons of traditional employment. Let's talk a little bit about entrepreneurship now. And so we thought it was interesting doing some research. We wanted to understand, okay, why do people become entrepreneurs? What are the reasons why they pursue it? And this is really interesting. This is data from Guidant Financial. They found 60% of folks said they did it because they want to be their own boss. 47% of respondents said that they are dissatisfied with their current jobs. They want to be in entrepreneurship so they can do something different. 31% say their passion drives them to entrepreneurship. 23% said they do it because they're unemployed. Catastrophic life event caused them, can't get a job or don't have a job, I'm going to go do this. 23% said they are not yet ready to retire, so this is Act 2.0 for them. And then 21% said they do it because they saw an opportunity. There was an opportunity for me to pursue entrepreneurship, and that is what I fell into. Now, none of these are inherently good or inherently bad, but I think it's interesting, Brian. I certainly know that in your experience you would agree with this. Maybe some of these don't create the staying power necessary, because we've already shown that it's like climbing a cliff. It's not the easiest thing in the world to step out and be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I love that. We're going to close the show, so make sure you stick around. We're going to tell you how to do this the right way if you do want to be an entrepreneur. But I think if you're just doing it to get out of your current job that you dislike, you may find that it's a lot harder than you realize. And if you're just doing it because you're just passionate about doing something and you haven't done the research and the data to know, hey, is this even viable to make a living doing this for, to pay the bills and grow a family and do all the things, you might be sorely disappointed. So it is making sure you have to begin with the end in mind and have a good plan that intersects the passion, the opportunities, and all the other things that come with it.
I love it. So, okay, let's talk about some of the unique benefits as it relates to entrepreneurship. The first one, and this seems kind of common sense, but it makes sense, is you're probably going into a field that you enjoy. If you're choosing to start a business where you get to call the shots and you get to choose what you sell or what service you provide, you're probably going to pick something that you like. You're probably going to pick something that you have some sort of affinity for. Very few entrepreneurs start a business that they hate right out of the gate. That's just not the reason why you would go into that. So you get to choose something, hey, I want to provide this service or provide this good to the world, and it's something I care about. I would argue that's a benefit that maybe if you just have a job that you clock in and out of, you don't have that same sort of mindset.
Yeah, that's definitely a benefit. I think this is kind of what I thought, is that if you're an entrepreneur, you'll get to have more freedom. Now, look, this is true. Because remember, I told you I wanted to go to the schools, the kids' plays, or when they sing at Christmas time, I wanted to be able to leave the office. I want to make sure I didn't miss any of the life's sweet elements. That is true. I do have more freedom for that. But if I was doing it just for the sake of working less, I don't think it's as true.
I don't think you worked less, actually.
Yeah, I mean, like I worked both a little bit, not in a bad way, because it is back to that point number one. I love what I do for a living. So things I get, things that come on the brain while I'm asleep, or I think about and I write it down, and then I'll work on a Saturday, I'll work on a Sunday, and it doesn't feel like I'm working, but it is not less hours like I originally thought it was going to be.
You're more control of your time. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have more time, right?
Yep.
What about this? One of the other benefits of entrepreneurship is that theoretically, your earning potential could be higher. You might be able to make more as an entrepreneur than as a traditional employee, and you can likely control the way that you're paid and when that pay comes. But again, that's not a given, and we're going to talk more about that in a moment. But potentially, you could earn more. The pot of money at the end of the rainbow could be bigger for entrepreneurs than traditional employees.
No, it definitely is. There's something there in the fact that it's not that it happens easier. It's just that I don't think that there's a ceiling on it like there is when you're an employee.
That's right.
There's nobody that's going to put a restrictor because they're worried about, are we paying him more than they're paying them, and all this other comparison. It's just, what value are you bringing to the marketplace? And if you can keep scaling that and keep adding, it keeps going up.
And then listen to this. The data suggests that entrepreneurs in general are happier than employees. Now I'm going to read some statistics to you, but Brian, you had an interesting point on this. It said 76% of small business owners say they are happy, while 24% say they feel neutral or unhappy. So a lot of business owners say they're happy. 46% of employees, those who work for someone else, say they're happy and feel valued at work. So
that's
less than half.
Yep.
92% of small business owners don't regret starting their business. So that sounds like a ringing endorsement. Almost 100% of business owners today said they don't regret it. But you threw some cold water on that.
Yeah, I do think, look, we asked people who made it on the other side of they climbed the top of the mountain and they're there. And I told you the analogy. I think this is like cold plunging. When I hear people tell me how awesome cold plunging is, I'm always like, well, yeah, you shocked your body. You jumped into a body of cold water. You came out, you got all these endorphins and everything, all the things that, your body thought it was going to die in the moment. You tricked it. And then you got all this adrenaline and everything. So you survived it. So of course you're like super happy. Well, the same thing with entrepreneurship. It has a high washout or failure rate. So if you're interviewing people who have been entrepreneurs for a period of time that gets beyond the washout or failure rate, yes, you're going to have people that are very happy. I think about one of my best friends from childhood who was growing up. His dad got laid off as a welder, wasn't making a ton of money, couldn't find another job. So then he started. He
was one of the 21% that were unemployed.
He started, unemployed, but then he started, doing some metal fabrication, and then he caught traction. This thing grew. And when I was a young person in high school, that I would go work extra hours, which cracks me up that I think back now to my parents saying, yeah, go work at Mr. Harry's shop.
At a metal fabrication
huge stamps, where we're pushing. I could have lost a limb very easily the way we were doing, because, when you're doing drills and cutting metal, they want you to be paid for speed. And here I am, a high school kid, not thinking about the risk of what we're doing whatsoever. But when you'd ask, I remember asking my friend's father about his entrepreneurial journey, because he started having the fruits of it, buying multiple Harleys and all these other things. You could tell he was successful. His eyes would kind of glaze over in a very happy way, because he had gone the road less traveled and it had all worked out. So I think the data is right, but I do think you always have to worry about survivorship bias in data points, because you have people who actually survived the hard journey of the road less traveled. So of course the data is going to skew towards them.
Makes sense. All right, so let's talk about maybe now some of the downsides of entrepreneurship. And the first one, we've kind of already alluded to. It's very difficult. If you think about to the illustration that we showed at the beginning, it's like scaling a cliff, where it's not an easy journey. It's not just a smooth path to the top. And if you don't believe us, look at these statistics. 65% of small businesses, so well over half of small businesses, fail inside of the first 10 years. That means they no longer exist inside the first 10 years. And of the ones that make it, of the ones that do survive, only 9% ever reach $1 million in annual revenue. Now, I think it's important to note that's revenue, not profit. So if you are thinking about entrepreneurship as this idea where I'm going to make millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, or even hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars, recognize less than 10% of businesses, small businesses, ever even make it over the 7-figure part before you take out all the expenses. It's top line revenue. It's a hard path to go.
Yeah, that's revenue, not income, not profit, as Bo has already said. So there's this is a lot of people that might be working paycheck to paycheck, even as entrepreneurs, because even if they have $1 million of revenue, if they only have a 10% or some businesses are 5% profit margins, you quickly see that they're making between $50,000 to $100,000. That's not, you're not Elon Musk territory when you have that type of stuff. So don't think that everybody is on fat cat road just because they started a business.
No, but you said though, Brian, but it is hard, so much so that even in your first couple years of entrepreneurship, when you first went on your own, you weren't necessarily saying, oh, this is the greatest decision I ever made, right?
Well, I said, because the previous stat we showed where 92% of business owners say it was a great decision. At this moment in time, obviously, I'm like, yeah, I made the right decision. But here's the reality of the situation. If you'd have looked at my business in years 1 through even year 5 or 6, I would have been better served being an employee. I'd have been saving and investing the entire period. I wouldn't have had the first 2 years where I couldn't, because I think people, I'm going to tell y'all something, and this is a little confessional. It took me 3 years to get $10 million of assets under management, where I was getting clients. And now we do that in a matter of weeks. And I think about that. It was kind of sad how slow it was for me to catch traction. So that I left this job that I was making really good money, In the first year, I think my tax return was I made $17,000. So I mean, I
From
basically
almost 6 figures down to 17.
So I essentially was making a fifth of what I was doing. So if you looked at those first few years, it would have been like, and I remember people whispering because, now everybody, they were on the bandwagon. I supported Brian when he started his business. But I heard rumors, because, there's been divorces and friends, and then you hear from the ex-spouse and they say, yeah, his parents are like, what was Brian thinking? There's no way that he was going to make it thinking he was going to do this. So there's a lot of people who doubt you until you have this level of success. And then they all support you and they all on the bandwagon.
Because hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody wants to support the winners, but it's not. I made the analogy. It is the duck, on water, and the fact that you don't see. They might try to make it look easy. They might try to make it look like they're not stressed out and not sleeping at night, but those legs are kicking as fast as they can underwater just to keep things alive. So it's tough. Yeah, that's a con, and I'm very aware of it. I'm not so sure if I didn't have the clarity of trauma of losing my father that I would have naturally been an entrepreneur.
Another downside of entrepreneurship that often people don't talk about is that if you leave the workforce, it may be difficult to re-enter if it doesn't work out. If you go pursue this entrepreneurial endeavor and the industry that you're in and the technology changes, the processes changes, or whatever happens, and you spend time on this entrepreneurial endeavor, it may be hard for you to go back into the workforce. And certainly it may be hard for you to enter back in at the place that you left. So you may have to start over twice if this thing does not work. So you want to make sure that before you make this leap, you recognize the real risks that exist. If you're climbing up that cliff and you fall back down to the bottom of the mountain, you might have to start over at zero. And that's a realistic concern that could be taking place.
And then I'll kind of close out this part of it with it's not all success and champagne. My biggest shock, we have this saying around here, don't get busy doing nothing.
Sure.
First year I started my company, guys, if you'd have seen my financial statements, they were pristine because I was spending all my time doing that because you know what I didn't want to do? I didn't want to go make relationships. I didn't want to go sell because I was a natural analytical thinker. Yes, I liked people, but I'm not the type of person that walks into a room full of people and I want to go shake everybody's hand. I want to go hang out with the 3 or 4 people that I'm really close to and we have a bunch of laughs. But when you're an entrepreneur, there's a lot of sales. I think a lot of people don't realize how uncomfortable you have to be to go and do the stuff nobody else wants to do. And that's the cold hard reality. And that's why I think fear drives you to do a lot of things that the average person just is not going to do because cold calling people, I don't know if that works anymore, but I joined all the clubs. I was anything and everything to try to get me adjacent to people that I thought could become prospects or clients. I had to do it because I was trying to pay the bills, and it was just a hard journey.
How about this? When you're an entrepreneur, you are now the boss. So if you work in an industry where you have to have employees, you are now in charge of hiring and firing people.
Yeah.
You're in charge of committing to another human being. Hey, I'm going to create an opportunity where you're going to work, and the well-being of your family is going to depend on me making sure that this business continues to operate, that this business continues to run. Or if things don't work out, you owe it to your business. Now you have to fire someone. These are very, very difficult things to do that entrepreneurs have to recognize. It's not all the good stuff. It's not all the fun stuff. It's not all the happy stuff. It is hard decisions you have to make as an entrepreneur.
I get a chuckle. I think if people knew the amount of background compliance you have to do, and I'm not just talking about taxes. Let me tell you, I wish I could do like We Didn't Start the Fire, or It's the End of the World as We Know It by REM, and the fact that, because it's like taxes upon taxes, and I'm not just talking about income taxes, I'm talking about you've got payroll taxes, you've got, I just did a workers' comp audit for my workers' comp insurance, because I got to make sure we file those. You got to file your payroll tax returns, you have to file, I have a sales and use tax return, I have a franchise franchise and excise tax return that we have to do with the local community. I have a property tax where I have to go list out all the, not inventory, but just assets, fixed assets, furniture, fixtures, equipment, and I have to send that to the government by March 1st of every year. As Secretary of State, every entity, I have to go register with them annually to keep my businesses all compliant. I'm leaving stuff off here, but it's just, and then you think about bookkeeping. If you're not, and nobody's going to love your business like you, so even if you're hiring somebody to do these things, you have to know enough so that you can keep yourself above water. Insurance and risk mitigation. I already mentioned the workers' comp audit, but I think about my liability insurance renewals.
Yep.
I even have them working with my insurance agent right now to make sure we've listed all the things that could be risk, because you have employer risk, you have employees stealing risk, you have all these things, even errors in admission. We have insurance upon insurance. I didn't even know all this insurance existed. And I think if everybody knew the chaos of compliance and risk mitigation in business, you'd be like, what the heck? It is a lot. You don't eat the elephant all at once. You eat that elephant one bite at a time, and when you're running a business in a lot of ways.
All right, so we talked about the pros and cons of traditional employment. We've talked about the pros and cons of entrepreneurship. But now let's talk about, if you are going to do this, if you are going to make the jump, and we've already said that it can be a very rewarding jump, and it can be a great decision so long as you're doing it in the right way. Okay, then what are the ways I should do it? How do I think about this? How do I approach this? We're going to walk you through how to start a business the right way. What are the things you should think about? And the first one, again, seems kind of obvious, but find your niche, find what you're going to do, find what you're going to sell or what service you are going to provide, and figure out what talent you have to meet that specific need.
I love how, because we're financial planners and wealth managers, and it seems like everything we do always leads to having a good plan. I mean, and one of the first things we do when you're doing a good plan is you have to take inventory of what you are. That's why we love on the investment side, we tell people to do your annual net worth statement, to know what you own, what you owe, so you can be the best version of yourself. It's the same way when it comes to your talents and skills. You need to figure out, what are you good at, and where does that aptitude, what can you do better than 5% or 90, what can you do better than 95% of the public, and it has a market value. If you can figure that out, it goes a very long way to you figuring out what's worth it. Now, just because you're passionate about it or you care about it, that ain't gonna get the ball moved. You've actually got to find that intersection of, you're good at something, and there's people who will freely and over again clearly and easily depart with their money to keep giving you more of the money for the thing that you're adding value.
Yeah, there's a great exercise you can do if you are thinking about moving into an entrepreneurial endeavor. We think there are 4 questions that you can ask yourself, and this is derived from the Japanese Ikigai concept, but ask these 4 questions.
Fancy.
Right? What is it that you love? What does the world need? What can you be paid for? And then what are you good at? And you can actually say, okay, the intersection of those 4 things, I love it, I'm good at it, the world needs it, and I can get paid for it. That's your dream job. Well, maybe your passion is underwater basket weaving, but it's real hard to get paid for that, and maybe the world doesn't need a ton of it. You can find where these intersections lie. Are you looking for a missional endeavor, or are you looking for a passion endeavor? Is this a profession or is this a vocation? Well, the closer you can get to finding that intersection, and this goes for entrepreneurship as well as traditional employment, likely the more fulfilled you will be with that thing that you're doing 35, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, every single week. So the more clearly you can define this, the more clearly you can answer these questions, the better you're likely setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, and we even made a comment, just because you love something doesn't mean it can be a profitable business.
Point.
And I'm going to put rubber to the road on that and build it up. But I think it's one of those things where you have to save for the transition. And let me tell you what I mean by this is that I told you the first 5 to 6 years, even though I'm in a very successful state now, the first 5 to 6 years, if you looked at my journey on entrepreneurship, it was a complete failure in a lot of ways. I mean, because it was a lot slower process. I didn't recognize how scarce it was going to be those first 2 years. But here's what I did do right. And I did a full-on, you can call it a business plan, you can call it a spreadsheet, or we like to call it the 3D plan, is I actually put pen to paper and created a business plan with 3 different scenarios. And when I talk about the 3D plan, I want you to do first, let's do the fun D, which is the dream plan.
I love it.
You're going to be rich. All your dreams are going to be fulfilled. It's going to be your best version of the life. This is why you're doing
This
it.
is the easy one to do.
Oh,
this
everybody.
is
This is the
to
one
do.
that I think most people do this part of the plan is I'm going to be rich with the daydream plan. The second one is the down to earth. This is what realistically you think could happen. Yes, you're going to have some obstacles, but this is what if you were going to present this to a bank or somebody who you're hoping will, work with you on terms or whatever else, this is the down to earth plan of what you think will happen. But and I think a lot of people kind of consider doing that, but here's the third version of the D that nobody does, but you need to do is the do-do plan.
Yep.
And because here's what the do-do plan is, this is, oh my God, I've made a horrible mistake. This is not going anything like I thought through. How do I cope? How do I fix? Or how do I quit? And that's the thing. Here's where I did things wrong. Right. I actually did the do-do plan and I knew, hey, it's going to take me 24 to 36 months just to catch any traction whatsoever. So how do I have enough money to get me and my family through that tough building period? Because I think a lot of businesses wash out not because they weren't good or not because they didn't do some prep of taking an analysis of their aptitudes and other things. It's just that they might have only given themselves 6 months to find success, and they maybe needed 24 months to actually have the amount of capacity or time or money and resources to get them there. So you didn't really give your business the head start it needed or the margin to be successful, and that's a big failure problem right there.
Now, what I think is beautiful, Brian, is that when you first set out, and I love that I've had a front row seat to this, when you first set out on your entrepreneurial journey, it was the dream plan that got you to do it. That was the thing that had you step out. But realistically, in that first year, it was kind of the do-do plan that played out. And then as time went on, it kind of moved into the down-to-earth plan. And I would argue now that it's the beyond your dreams plan, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's turned out great. But you had to have the wherewithal and the liquidity and the resolve to stick to the plan, even though you actually experienced all three of the D's on your entrepreneurial journey. And I think a lot of folks, when the doo-doo hits the fan, so to speak, they give up and they bail out. If you can plan for that and plan through that, you might be amazed at what awaits you on the other side.
Yeah, so that's kind of the steps if I was doing it right, if you're doing the preparation side. Now I want to kind of close the show with how you can kind of do this in both.
Sure.
You really pay respects to going both the employee route, the entrepreneur route. And Bo, I think you are the perfect case study for this, is because and you've even shared with me, you have great field vision. Even when I hired you initially right out of college, and I think you had even some opportunities beyond, because I wouldn't say I was a startup, but I was definitely a one-man shop with an administrator. And you took this job, and I even knew about you because the professors had told me, they gave me 3 names of the top performers in the program, because I had an inside track being on, at that time, the advisory panel for the financial planning program at University of Georgia. And you came on, you even convinced me to come work. And you, by being so good and then adding so much value to my business, it became very quickly, I realized you were trying to become an entrepreneur, and then you were so good at adding value to my business that I was like, what the heck am I doing? Bo is so good. I want to actually be business partners with Bo, and you now are full-on entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I mean, we make decisions as we're buying real estate, as we're launching new things. It is. So I know I just probably doted on you a lot, but is there anything that you could give insight on that journey for you?
Well, what I recognized is that, hey, I wanted to find a position. If you're a college student or someone earlier in your career, I recognize, okay, I could go to a large institution, a large organization, and I could kind of go be a cog in the wheel. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you can do amazing work doing that. But for me personally, for my personality, I wanted to go somewhere where I could have a lot of exposure and a lot of impact really early on. And I told myself, if I can go do this thing and I can impact this organization and impact this individual and make something that's really good even better, I bet there are going to be opportunities on the other side of that. And so I kept leaning into that. How do I make myself so valuable that the person on the other side of the table recognizes, holy cow, I can't ever let this guy go. I got to make sure I hold on to him. I got to make sure that they're a pivotal part of our organization. And that worked really well for me. I think that most organizations, and I would argue most small businesses, if you can find a way to make yourself invaluable, you will likely have that same sort of response. Now, I think in your story, Brian, you didn't have, even though you had that same sort of drive, you didn't have that same sort of opportunity. That's why you went out and had to do the entrepreneurial thing. For me, I never had to do that, and I was able to satisfy that goal or that desire by being an entrepreneur. What you have to do is you have to assess your own current situation. What opportunities are there available to me, and is there a way that I can think through, okay, there's a lot of pros to traditional employment, and there's a lot of pros to entrepreneurship. Can I have all the pros and cut out all the cons? And if you can do that, in my mind, that's a win-win-win scenario.
Well, I want to transition to the second thing we were talking about, is how you can do both, is that I think a lot of people think it is like, I did have a jump moment that I left a really good paying job and then I jumped into full-on entrepreneurship, and it was scary. There was a lot of scarcity and it was tough. But a lot of you, and we even have some people who've done this, where 39% of people have side hustles.
Yep.
And I think about even like some of our video editing services. We have employees that do video editing, but we have contractors that do video editing, that I think that we have helped them start their entrepreneurial journey because we were their side hustle for a while, and then we kind of became an anchor customer for them. You can ease into this instead of jumping headfirst into the deep end. You could potentially do both.
And what side hustles can allow you to do is they can allow you to save and invest for bigger goals. I think we know a lot of folks, Brian, who they started a side hustle, and because they had the stable employment, the traditional job, it created an environment where their side hustle turned into their main hustle. I would argue even this little show right here, it kind of started as a side project. It was a side hustle for you, but because you also had the other tradition, not you were an employee, but you had the traditional business happening, it created an environment where the side hustle could continue to grow. I think now, in today's day and age, it's easier than ever for those sorts of things to happen. So you might not have to do the jump, the risk that you took to be an entrepreneur. You can have the best of both worlds. You can literally have your cake and eat it too.
And then the last thing we put on here is, I just don't want you to feel like you have to come up with a brand new idea or brand new innovation to be successful with either one of these avenues. I think if you just continue, we talk about on the show overwhelming abundance and value all the times. If you can be somebody who has a skill set, you do like Bo did with offering tons of value to me when we first started working, or if you're starting your own endeavor and you sell a product or you do a service and you overcompensate and give them something better than they anticipated, how can you not be successful? And you didn't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to work hard and understand that exceeding expectations has tremendous value. And it could be as simple as, opening a small business or even doing a gig economy job just incredibly well.
So there's not one path that makes the absolute most sense for everyone, but there probably is a path that makes the most sense for you. And we want you to figure out how you can dive into that. Because not only do we think there's a better way to do money, there's a better way to do work. And we hope that you find it. Because when you figure that out, it's amazing how fun and how fulfilling, how exciting this entire financial journey can be.
So guys, go check it out, moneyguy.com. You can also go to moneyguy.com/resources if you want to download some free stuff. We love loading you up with tons of information. We call it the abundance cycle. We're going to love on you and be with you every stage of your success. Remember, true wealth is the freedom to focus on what really matters to you. I'm your host, Brian Preston. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.